And so affect is the direct impact precognitively of external stimuli on the body and on the self. Whereas emotion, in the humanities context, is often thought to involve cognition. I'm happy, I know I'm happy. But then there are other things going on that are affects that are not part of a cognitive process. So that's just a really broad definition. There's like lots of crossover. You can read more about that, and we will read more about that. But as I was just thinking about the difference between Hobbes and Descartes, I think that Descartes is very much a theorist of affect, because he's interested in the direct impact on the body. And that's often how we think about affect now, even if we don't really think of, the pineal gland, of everything being processed up there. But it's a little different now. But the basic idea that somehow you're impacted by external stimuli in a way that bypasses a cognitive process and makes changes on the body is what is called by theorists of the humanities affect. And I think, and so a lot of psychoanalytic critics are trying to come back to Descartes to think about what he can teach us about this idea of affect. Hobbes, by contrast, I think, even though there's definitely some affect in Hobbes and external stimuli in the body, is more interested in, I think, what we call emotion. And I think emotion and affect are often distinguished in the humanities. They're not distinguished in quite such a clear way in other fields, but I think Hobbes is more interested in emotion. It's a kind of in a cognitive process of understanding how emotions are working in the context of social conflicts and how emotions are actually produced by social conflicts. And I think so if you think like for Hobbes, if you're just like born out in the woods, I mean the impossible scenario, right? You're born out of the woods and you never have any contact with another human. It's not clear that you would see life as a race that only stops with death. There wouldn't necessarily, if there was nobody to compete with, I think in Hobbes, there wouldn't be emotion. Whereas in Descartes, you would still have these experiences because they would just flood into your body from external stimulation, and they would guide you to helping you make good decisions, like running away from the lion and running toward the food. So I think maybe that's some kind of way to think about the difference between Hobbes and Descartes and emotion and affect. You could think about that. That's just kind of a theory that I'm kind of working with right now. And then to expand it to the drama, and again, like making schematic distinctions is always a little dangerous, but this might help clarify some things, perhaps. I think the tragedies of this time are about affect, and the emotion, and the comedies are about emotion. So if you think about how, we talked about how Montezuma responds to being rejected by the Inca king for saying he can't marry his daughter. He doesn't necessarily do the thing that's in his best interest. He just simply, that information just overwhelms him and he responds. And then there's a scene where he's brought to Zempoala's court and he's Zempoala's enemy, and it is definitely in her best interest to kill him, but she just can't do it because she's just kind of flooded with this impulse to preserve his life, which also happens in the Indian Emperor with Cortez and Almeria when she's gonna kill him. I think what happens in the heroic plays is kind of alien to us because they're just responding. And the closest analogy I can think of is opera. They're like operas without the music. They're all about these floods of feeling and expression. Whereas the comedies are really about social analysis. And so Hippolyta is actually very, very much able to control her own emotions and very cognizant of her own emotions. Her emotion is, 1, I want to be a lady. 2, I want to live in London. 3, I want to coach and 6 horses. And 4, I want to marry somebody who I'm attracted to. So she kind of manipulates everybody else using their emotional responses to get what she wants. But anyone in that comic world who's overwhelmed by emotion is doomed, really. They're kind of really in trouble if they're not in control. Whereas that sort of loss of control is, I would say, it's admired in the heroic plays, because Zempoala, just thinking about the Indian Queen for a minute, Zempoala is actually forgiven by the other characters, even though she does something terrible. She is the illegitimate usurper, but she's partly forgiven because of this affective relationship she has to Montezuma. And as it turns out, I think in the play, it's not that she really fell in love with him, but somehow she knew that he was royal. She didn't know it cognitively, but she knew it affectively. So she couldn't bring herself to destroy him. And we also know that she has a dream in which her subconscious is telling her this, and she doesn't really get it. And she brings it to the priest to analyze her dream. And, he tries to distract her because he kind of knows what it's about, but he doesn't want her to know. And so, but she never kind of comprehends this. But because she has this affective response to Montezuma that stops her from killing him, she is mourned by the other characters. And at the end, they're not celebrating her death. They're sad that she's dead.